Wealthy heir falls for black historian who uncovers his family's shocking slave secrets. Chapter 1. The inheritance papers felt like a death sentence in Owen Ellsworth's hands. 36 years old, worth more money than 3 generations could spend, and he'd never felt more trapped. Ellsworth Manor loomed before him, 3 stories of Georgian architecture that reeked of old money and older sins. The place where his grandfather had hosted cocktail parties while pretending the family fortune hadn't been built on human misery. Owen pushed through the front door into a foyer that screamed wealth and whispered guilt. Dust particles danced in afternoon sunlight, and the air tasted stale, like secrets left too long undisturbed. His phone buzzed with another text from his New York partners. $12 million for the property. Clean sale, no complications, back to Manhattan by Friday. Easy money. Except nothing about his family had ever been easy. Gravel crunched outside. Through the sidelight windows, Owen watched a silver sedan pull up like it owned the place. The woman who emerged moved with a purpose that meant trouble: dark jeans, white shirt, natural hair pulled back to show a neck that belonged in Renaissance paintings. Beautiful. And clearly pissed about something. Owen opened the door before she could knock, offering his most disarming smile. "You must be here about the property." Owen Ellsworth. Her dark eyes flashed with something that made his pulse quicken. "I know exactly who you are." Voice like honey over steel, pure Georgia with an edge that could cut glass. Dr. Annette Winter, Southeastern Historical Preservation Society. "I'm here to document this estate before you bulldoze it for profit." Owen blinked. "Excuse me?" "Don't." She stepped closer, and he caught vanilla and spice, something that made him want to lean in despite her obvious hostility. Rich white men don't inherit southern estates to preserve history. "You're here to cash out, aren't you?" Heat flared in Owen's chest. He'd been judged for his wealth before, but something about this woman's dismissal cut deeper. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough." Her chin lifted, and Owen found himself cataloging the elegant line of her throat, the way sunlight caught gold in her brown skin. "Your family fortune came from trading human beings. This estate housed enslaved people for over a century. Men like you see dollar signs where I see sacred ground. Men like me." Owen moved closer, close enough to see her pulse beating fast at her collarbone. "Tell me, Dr. Winter, what exactly are men like me like?" Something shifted between them, electricity crackling in the space where anger met attraction. Her breath caught, almost imperceptibly, and Owen realized they were standing close enough that he could count her eyelashes. Then her walls snapped back up. Entitled and disconnected. More concerned with profit than the truth. Owen's laugh held no humor. "Want to know what men like me are really like? We're tired of carrying guilt for things we didn't do while trying to figure out how to move forward without dishonoring anyone. But sure, let's go with entitled." Surprise flickered across her face, quickly hidden. "Pretty words. The development company probably coached you well." "What development company?" "Hartwell and Associates. They've been circling this property like." She stopped, studying his genuinely confused expression. "You really don't know?" "I inherited this place 3 weeks ago. I've gotten one offer, made 0 decisions." Owen ran his hand through his hair. "Look, can we start over? You're here for a reason, and I could use information about what I'm dealing with." Annette hesitated, and Owen found himself hoping she'd stay. Which made no sense, she'd insulted him within seconds of meeting. But her passion, her fierce protection of history, intrigued him more than it should. "I was hired to document the slave quarters and main house before." She gestured vaguely. "Before whatever happens next. There are stories here that need preserving. Then document them." Her eyebrows rose. "Just like that?" "Just like that." Owen stepped aside, gesturing toward the door. "After you, Dr. Winter." As she brushed past him, Owen caught another hint of that spice, something that made him want to know more about the woman who just dissected him with surgical precision. This was definitely going to be interesting. Annette stood in the center of the foyer, her historian's eye automatically cataloging details. Crown molding carved in the 1850s. Heart pine floors original to construction. A mahogany staircase that had seen generations of feet, including those who'd counted human beings as property. "How much do you know about your family's history?" she asked without looking at Owen. "Enough to know I won't like the complete answer." His honesty surprised her. Annette turned to look at him this time, tall, probably 6'2", with lean strength that suggested discipline over vanity. Dark hair that looked finger-combed, blue eyes carrying more weight than most trust fund babies managed. And he was watching her with intensity that made her skin warm in ways she absolutely couldn't afford. "Your great-great-grandfather Thomas Ellsworth owned over 200 enslaved people," she said, making her voice clinical. "One of Georgia's largest slave traders. This house was built with money from human trafficking." Owen's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Figured as much. Does that bother you?" "Of course it bothers me." "What kind of question is that?" "The kind I have to ask." Annette moved toward the staircase, running her hand along polished mahogany. "You'd be amazed how many descendants think slavery was just good business, or that everyone was doing it. My ancestors weren't different. They were part of something evil, and I've known that my whole life." Annette stopped. In years of researching plantation histories, she'd rarely heard such direct acknowledgement from an heir. "Then why haven't you learned more?" Owen was quiet for a long moment. "Because learning about it means figuring out what to do about it. And I've been a coward." The admission hung between them like an offered hand. Annette had come expecting another privileged white man who saw history as inconvenient. Instead, she'd found someone genuinely haunted by inheritance. Dangerous territory. "I need to see the slave quarters," she said, deflecting from connection. "What remains?" "I'll show you." Owen moved toward a side door. "Fair warning, I've only been out there once. It's difficult." They walked across back lawn in silence, Georgia heat pressing down like judgment. Annette stayed hyper-aware of Owen beside her. Unconscious confidence in his movement, the way he shortened his stride for hers, expensive cologne mixed with something distinctly male that made her pulse quicken. This was exactly why she worked alone. The slave quarters sat 200 yards behind the main house, small wooden structures in various stages of decay. Some roofs completely caved. Others leaning at dangerous angles. But enough remained to tell stories of people who'd lived here, loved here, suffered here. Annette pulled out her camera and notebook, falling into documentation rhythm. Measurements, architectural details, signs of daily life that history books missed. Pottery fragments. Carved initials. Evidence of humanity in a system designed to strip it away. "How many people lived here?" Owen asked behind her. "At peak? Probably 40 families. Maybe 150 people total." Annette knelt beside foundation stones of the largest cabin. This would have housed the head driver's family. Still cramped. 12 by 16 feet for 6 or 7 people. Owen crouched beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Jesus. This is where your family's fortune came from. These people's labor, expertise, lives. They built everything you inherited." "I know." His voice roughened. "I know, and I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do with that." Annette studied him. He wasn't performing guilt or fishing for absolution. Just lost. A man confronting legacy he'd inherited but never chosen. "Some people would say you're not responsible for your ancestors' actions," she said carefully. "What would you say?" "I'd say you're not responsible for what they did, but you are responsible for what you do next." Owen met her eyes, and something passed between them, understanding, recognition. For a moment, barriers of race and class and history seemed permeable. Then her phone rang, shattering the moment. "Dr. Winter," she answered, stepping away from Owen's proximity. "Yes, Dr. Walker, I'm at the estate." "What do you mean they're fast-tracking the development permit?" Owen watched Annette's expression shift from calm to sharp concern. When she hung up, her jaw was set in a way that meant trouble. "Problem? Hartwell and Associates filed a preliminary development application this morning. They're claiming you've already agreed to sell." "That's impossible. I've never spoken to them." "Then someone's lying." Her dark eyes flashed. "And I need to know if it's you or them. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and join our Dear Love Diaries family. Your special place in this community of heartfelt stories is waiting for you. These passionate journeys of souls connecting against all odds have brought together thousands of beautiful hearts just like yours. Make sure you hit the bell too, so you'll know immediately when a new story unfolds in our diary of love. Owen pulled out his phone, scrolling through ignored emails and voicemails. "Here," he said, showing her the screen. 12 missed calls from James Hartwell. Figured he was another real estate vulture. Annette studied the call log, and Owen found himself studying her, how she bit her lower lip when concentrating, how afternoon light caught warm undertones in her skin, how passion for her work transformed her entire presence. "Call him back," she said. "If they're filing permits without consent, that's fraud. Or they know something about my inheritance I don't." Owen's expression darkened. "My grandfather was full of surprises. Most unpleasant." "What do you mean?" Owen hesitated. He'd carried this burden alone for 3 weeks, but something about Annette's directness made him want to share. "He left a letter. Said the family owed a debt money couldn't repay, and I was the only one who might have courage to try." Owen's laugh was bitter. "Problem is, he didn't specify what debt or how to repay it." Annette went still. "Do you still have the letter?" "In the house." "Why?" "Because when white plantation owners talk about debts they can't repay, it usually means they found their conscience. And that kind of conscience leaves records." They walked back as shadows lengthened across lawn. Annette found herself stealing glances at Owen, reassessing assumptions. Yes, he carried privilege like expensive clothes, obvious in his bearing, his unconscious confidence. But underneath was something else, something that made her wonder what kind of man emerged when you stripped away inherited wealth and social expectations. Dangerous thinking for a woman who'd built her career on objectivity. Inside, Owen retrieved an envelope from his grandfather's study, leather and tobacco-scented, lined with books. The letter was cursive on expensive stationery. "Owen," Annette read aloud. "By the time you read this, you'll know what our family built their fortune on. What you don't know is some of us tried to make it right. Check the foundation of the summer kitchen. The truth has been waiting long enough. Make better choices than we did. Harold Ellsworth." They looked at each other across the study. Outside, sun was setting, casting golden shadows and turning the room warm. "The summer kitchen," Owen said. "Separate building for hot weather cooking." Annette folded the letter carefully. "If something's hidden there, we should look. We should wait until morning. I should call Dr. Walker." But neither moved. The study felt suddenly intimate, charged with possibility and something else, something that made Annette acutely aware of how alone they were, how golden light made Owen's eyes almost amber, how her heart beat faster than historical discoveries usually warranted. "Dr. Winter," Owen said quietly. "Annette." The correction slipped out. "Annette." Her name sounded different in his voice, warmer. "Thank you. For being here, caring about this place. I know I'm probably the last person you wanted to work with. You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Someone who wouldn't care. Someone who'd see history as something to bulldoze for profit. Owen stepped closer, and Annette's breath caught. And now? Now I think you might be the most dangerous kind of person. Dangerous how? The kind who makes me forget why I keep things professional. The words hung between them, and Annette immediately regretted them. This was exactly what she couldn't afford, personal involvement that would compromise objectivity, integrity, boundaries. But Owen was looking at her like she'd just solved a puzzle he'd been working on his entire life. Annette, he said again, and this time her name sounded like a question. Before she could answer, before she could think of reasons this was terrible, her phone rang. The spell broke. Annette stepped back, grabbing her phone with slightly trembling hands. Dr. Walker. Annette, where are you? The permit hearing's been moved to tomorrow morning. If you're stopping this development, we need documentation tonight. Chapter 2. Tomorrow morning? Annette's voice sharpened. That's impossible. We need at least a week to properly. I know. But Hartwell has connections. They're pushing this through fast. Dr. Walker's voice crackled through the phone. Can you get enough tonight to establish historical significance? Annette looked at Owen, who was watching her with intensity that made coherent thought difficult. I'll manage. And Annette? Be careful. Men with that kind of money don't like hearing no. The call ended, leaving them alone in the golden-lit study. But the intimate moment had shattered, replaced by urgent reality. How long? Owen asked. For complete documentation? Weeks. For enough to stop a permit? Annette calculated quickly. All night. If I can access everything. Then we start now. We? Owen was already heading for the door. You think I'm letting you work alone in buildings that could collapse? Besides, it's my property. I want to know what my grandfather hid. They spent the next 2 hours in the main house, Annette photographing and cataloging while Owen hauled equipment and asked questions that revealed sharp intelligence beneath his privilege. He grasped architectural significance, understood connections between physical space and human experience, seemed genuinely affected by stories emerging from her research. The main staircase has hidden compartments, Annette explained, running hands along carved banister. These variations in woodwork? Families hid valuables, papers, sometimes underground railroad evidence. Owen traced the grain with careful fingers. Anything there now? Empty. But their existence suggests your family was more complex than simple slave trading. Maybe some had consciences. Maybe. Annette watched him in lamplight. Your grandfather certainly thought so. As darkness settled over the estate, they made their way to the summer kitchen, a smaller building 50 yards from the main house. Owen's flashlight cut through shadows that seemed to hold centuries of secrets. The summer kitchen was better preserved than the slave quarters but still showed decades of neglect. Brick foundation, wooden frame, massive fireplace that had once fed an entire plantation. Where would he hide something? Owen asked, playing light across walls. He said foundation. Annette knelt beside brick walls, running hands along mortar. Look for bricks that seem loose or different. They worked in silence, the earlier tension replaced by shared purpose. But Annette remained hyper-aware of Owen's presence, how he moved with unconscious grace, how his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he reached high, how he smelled like expensive cologne and something warmer, more personal. Historical objectivity, she reminded herself. Here. Owen's voice was tight with excitement. This whole section feels different. Annette moved to where he crouched, shoulders touching as she examined brickwork. 3 bricks in the foundation corner were definitely newer, the mortar slightly different in color. Help me, she said, pulling a tool from her kit. Working together, they loosened mortar and removed bricks. Behind them was a cavity containing a wrapped oilcloth package. Owen pulled it out with reverent hands. Inside was a leather journal, pages yellowed but intact. The cover bore initials, T.E. Thomas Ellsworth. "Your great-great-grandfather," Annette breathed. Owen opened the journal. The first entry was dated 1858, written in script matching Harold's letter. "God forgive me for what I have done," Owen read aloud. "The auction today sickened me beyond endurance. To see families torn apart for profit, children sold from mothers. I am complicit in abomination, and I fear damnation awaits." Annette's throat tightened. In years of research, she'd rarely found such direct acknowledgement from perpetrators. Owen continued reading. "Sarah, the house cook, asked if her son would be sold with the field hands. I could not meet her eyes to tell her yes. How do I look at these people who serve my family, who care for my children, and see them as property? How do I reconcile faith with fortune?" "He was struggling with it," Annette said softly. "Early, before abolition was widely discussed. There's more." Owen flipped pages. "I have begun freeing families quietly, providing papers and passage north. Margaret knows nothing, she would see it as financial ruin. But I cannot continue building wealth on bondage. If discovered, I could lose everything. But to continue means losing my soul." They read in silence, passing the journal between them, uncovering a story of moral awakening and quiet resistance hidden for over a century. Thomas Ellsworth had freed nearly 50 people over 5 years, providing money and papers for new lives in the North. He was running underground railroad operations, Annette realized. Right under his family's nose. And risking everyone's lives if caught. Owen's voice roughened. "No wonder grandfather said we owed unpayable debts." "Owen." Annette looked up from the journal. "This changes everything. If your ancestor actively worked against slavery, if this estate was Underground Railroad headquarters, it's historically significant enough to make development impossible." "Exactly." But even saying it, Annette felt complex emotions. Triumph at extraordinary discovery. Relief that the estate might be saved. And something else, something about the way Owen was looking at her in flashlight glow, like she'd handed him redemption. "There's something else." Owen held up separate paper that had been wrapped with the journal. A map. The hand-drawn map showed the estate layout with additional markings, tunnels connecting the main house to the summer kitchen, hidden rooms, and escape routes through the woods. "This place is riddled with hiding spots," Annette said, studying the map. "If we could find physical evidence of tunnels, historical designation would be ironclad." "The cellar," Owen said suddenly. "There's a wine cellar under the main house I haven't fully explored. If the tunnel starts there." They gathered materials and headed back, both energized by discovery but aware they were racing against time. The permit hearing was in 10 hours. The cellar door was hidden behind a bookcase in Owen's grandfather's study, another secret the old man had kept. Stone steps led down into darkness smelling of earth and aged wine. "Stay close," Owen said, offering his hand to help her down steep steps. His fingers sent electricity up her arm, and Annette had to force concentration on historical significance rather than the warmth of Owen's palm against hers. The cellar was larger than expected, with stone walls carved from natural bedrock. Wine racks lined one wall, most still holding dust-covered bottles. But it was the far wall that drew attention, where the map indicated the tunnel should begin. There, Annette pointed to stones arranged differently, suggesting a doorway. Owen examined the wall, pressing various stones until one shifted. Working together, they found the mechanism, a lever disguised as a loose stone that, when pushed, caused an entire wall section to swing inward. Beyond was a tunnel, narrow but tall enough to walk upright, heading toward the summer kitchen. "Christ," Owen breathed. "It's real." They stood at the tunnel entrance, flashlight beam disappearing into darkness, and Annette felt history pressing around them. This tunnel had carried people to freedom, built by a man tortured by conscience, keeping secrets for over a century. It was also getting them farther from the main house, deeper underground, more isolated than she should allow with a man already making her question every boundary. "Document first, then explore," she said, pulling out her camera. "Agreed." But Owen's voice was distracted, and when she looked, he was studying her face rather than the tunnel. "Annette." "What?" "Thank you. For all this. I know you didn't have to help me figure out family history. It's my job." "This isn't just your job." Owen stepped closer, and the cellar suddenly felt smaller. "You could have documented the quarters, filed your report, let developers do whatever. Instead, you're here at midnight helping me uncover secrets that might not matter." "They matter." Annette's voice came softer than intended. "History always matters. Truth always matters. What about this?" Owen gestured between them. "Does this matter?" The question hung in cellar air, loaded with possibility and danger. Annette knew she should step back, create distance, remind them both why personal involvement was impossible. Instead, she found herself moving closer. "This is complicated," she said. "Most worthwhile things are." "Owen, I can't." "We can't." But she was still moving closer, drawn by something stronger. "Can't what?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "Can't blur these lines. My credibility, career, and everything depends on maintaining objectivity." "What do you want?" "Not your career, not credibility." "What do you want, Annette?" The answer rose before she could stop it. "You. I want you, and that terrifies me." Owen's eyes flashed, and suddenly the space between them disappeared. His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing cheekbones as he searched her expression. "Terrifies me too," he admitted. "Everything about you. Your intelligence, passion, the way you look at me like you can see through every defense I've built." "Owen." "Tell me to stop," he said, face inches from hers. "Tell me this is just adrenaline from discovery, tell me you don't feel this thing between us, and I'll step back. Keep things professional." Annette's breath caught. She should tell him to stop. Should invoke all the real, sensible reasons why this was impossible. But looking into his eyes, seeing vulnerability and desire and something deeper, something like recognition, she couldn't lie. "I can't tell you to stop," she whispered. Owen's breath released in a rush, and his mouth was on hers, gentle at first, questioning. When she responded, kissing back with hunger that surprised them both, his control shattered. The kiss deepened, desperate, months of loneliness and years of walls crumbling between heartbeats. Annette's hands fisted in Owen's shirt, pulling him closer, and he pressed her against stone wall, his body covering hers as if he could shield her from complexity of what they were doing. When they broke apart, both breathed hard, shock reflected in each other's eyes. "That was..." Owen started. "A mistake," Annette finished, without conviction. "Was it?" She studied his face in flashlight glow. Sharp angles softened by desire, blue eyes dark with want, mouth that had just kissed her with such intensity. "I don't know," she admitted. "I don't know anything anymore." Owen's thumb traced her swollen lower lip. "We don't have to figure it out tonight. Don't we? Tomorrow everything changes. The hearing, development, whatever happens with the estate. Then let's focus on tonight. The tunnel, documentation, history that needs preserving." Owen stepped back, giving her space but keeping his eyes on hers. "But Annette? What just happened? I'm not pretending it didn't." "Neither am I." The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. "But I need time to think about what it means." "Take all the time you need." Owen picked up the dropped flashlight. "Ready to see where this goes? Drop a comment below and share a time when someone completely changed your perspective about something important. Your stories inspire our community. The tunnel stretched nearly 200 yards, emerging in concealed entrance behind the summer kitchen. Along the way, they found evidence of use, initials carved in walls, fabric fragments, a child's wooden toy left behind in some long-ago flight to freedom. 23 people, Annette said, counting initial sets. At least 23 used this tunnel. 23 lives, Owen corrected. 23 chances at freedom my ancestor helped provide. They emerged into the summer kitchen feeling like archaeologists discovering lost civilization. Physical evidence was overwhelming: tunnel, journal, map, Underground Railroad artifacts. No development company could argue against historical significance. But as they gathered materials and prepared to return, Annette felt weight of what had happened in the cellar. The kiss that changed everything, crossed lines she'd sworn never to cross. "Owen," she said as they reached the main house. "Yes?" "Tomorrow, after the hearing." She took a breath. "We need to talk. About boundaries, what's possible, what isn't." Owen nodded. "Whatever you need." But as they stood in the foyer where they'd first met 12 hours earlier, both dusty and exhausted and carrying weight of history and desire, Annette wondered if any amount of talking would change the fundamental truth she was beginning to understand. She was falling for Owen Ellsworth, heir to plantation fortune, keeper of family secrets, and quite possibly the most dangerous man she'd ever met. And despite every sensible reason why it couldn't work, she wasn't sure she wanted to stop falling. Chapter 3. The permit hearing at 9 a.m. felt like walking into an ambush. Annette had spent the remaining night hours preparing her presentation: photographs, historical documentation, Thomas Ellsworth's journal, preliminary assessment of the Underground Railroad tunnel system. She'd also spent those hours trying not to replay Owen's kiss, the way his hands had felt on her face, the way her body had responded with intensity that still made her pulse race. Professional boundaries. Historical objectivity and career preservation. She reminded herself. The words felt hollow now, like defenses against something that had already torn through every wall she'd built. At 8:30, Owen appeared in the courthouse parking lot looking like he'd slept as poorly as she had. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually perfect hair showed signs of restless hands. But he wore a sharp suit that emphasized his lean frame, and when he smiled across the parking lot, Annette's heart executed some complicated maneuver. "Ready for this?" he asked, falling into step beside her. "As ready as someone can be with 4 hours of prep for a case that should take weeks. We've got Thomas's journal. That has to count for something. Everything, if they'll listen." The courthouse was small-town Southern Gothic, red brick and white columns, a building where justice moved slowly and precedent carried weight. Inside, the hearing room was already filling. James Hartwell sat at the front table with 2 lawyers and an architect, silver hair and expensive suit radiating the confidence that came with money and political connections. He looked like every development executive Annette had battled: smooth, entitled, utterly convinced profit trumped preservation. Judge William Ellsworth entered from a side door, and Owen tensed beside her. The family resemblance was strong: same blue eyes, same aristocratic bone structure. But where Owen carried privilege with apparent discomfort, the judge wore his like armor. "Mr. Hartwell," Judge Ellsworth said without preamble. "I understand you're requesting expedited approval for the Ellsworth Manor Development Project." "Yes, Your Honor. All permits are in order, environmental impact assessed, and we have verbal agreement from the property owner." Owen stood. "Your Honor, I never gave verbal agreement to anything. I've never even spoken to Mr. Hartwell." Judge Ellsworth's expression didn't change. "Mr. Hartwell, do you have documentation of this agreement?" Hartwell's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. "We believed we had understanding with the previous owner, Harold Ellsworth, before his death." "My grandfather made no such agreement," Owen said firmly. "And Dr. Winter has discovered evidence that makes development impossible." Judge Ellsworth's gaze shifted to Annette, and she felt generations of power and prejudice in that look. "Dr. Winter, I presume you represent the Historical Society?" "Yes, Your Honor." Annette stood, voice steady despite her racing heart. "Last night we discovered significant evidence establishing Ellsworth Manor as a site of major Underground Railroad importance." She presented the journal, tunnel maps, photographs of physical evidence. As she spoke, she watched Judge Ellsworth's expression. He showed no emotion, but his hands gripped the bench tighter with each piece of evidence. "This is all very interesting," Hartwell interrupted, "but it doesn't change Mr. Ellsworth's right to develop his property. A few old tunnels don't constitute 23 documented cases of enslaved people finding freedom through this route." Annette cut him off. "Physical evidence of Underground Railroad activity. A detailed journal from the property owner documenting his participation in resistance to slavery. This isn't just historically significant, it's sacred ground." Dead silence. Judge Ellsworth stared at the journal on his bench, Thomas Ellsworth's handwriting visible even from the gallery. "Your Honor," Owen said quietly, "I'm requesting full historical review before any development permits are considered. My family owes a debt to history, and I intend to pay it." Judge Ellsworth looked between Owen and Annette, something passing across his face, surprise, maybe disappointment. "Mr. Ellsworth, are you certain you understand what you're giving up? The development value alone." "I understand perfectly." Owen's voice carried quiet steel. "Some things matter more than money." The judge's jaw tightened. "Very well. I'm ordering a 60-day moratorium on all development permits pending full historical assessment. Dr. Winter, you'll have complete access to conduct research." Hartwell's face reddened. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The economic impact has been considered and found less important than historical preservation." Court dismissed. As the gavel fell, Annette felt triumph mixed with relief. They'd won. The estate was safe, temporarily. But as they gathered materials to leave, she caught Judge Ellsworth's parting words to Owen, "You're making a mistake, nephew. Family loyalty should matter more than appeasing outsiders." Owen's response was quiet but clear. "Some family legacies deserve breaking, Uncle." Outside the courthouse, Owen caught Annette's arm as she headed toward her car. "Lunch?" "Owen, I need to call Dr. Walker, start organizing the full assessment." "You need to eat. And we need to talk about what happens next." He was right. And despite better judgment, Annette found herself agreeing. They drove to a small cafe outside town, where locals gathered and strangers were noted but not unwelcome. Over salads and sweet tea, they discussed assessment logistics, teams needed, timeline, documentation requirements. But underneath the conversation ran a current of awareness that made Annette hyper-conscious of everything: how Owen's fingers moved when he gestured, how he listened with complete attention, how his eyes kept finding hers across the small table. 60 days, Owen said finally. "Not very long. Enough, if we're organized. Dr. Walker can bring in a full team, document everything properly. And then?" Annette set down her fork. "Then you decide what you want to do with the property long term. Historical designation protects it from development, but doesn't solve maintenance questions, or what purpose it serves." "I've been thinking about that." Owen leaned back in his chair. "What if it became an educational center? Not just preserved, but active. A place where people could learn about Underground Railroad history, about slavery and resistance complexities. That would be..." Annette felt her heart skip. "That would be incredible. But expensive, complicated. I have money, Annette. More than I could spend in several lifetimes. What I don't have is purpose." Owen's eyes met hers. This could be purpose. They drove back to the estate in Owen's car, afternoon heat shimmering off asphalt. Dark clouds built on the horizon, towering thunderheads promising serious Georgia storm. "Looks like weather," Annette observed as they pulled up the circular drive. "More than weather." Owen studied the approaching storm. "We should probably." Lightning flashed across the sky, followed immediately by thunder that shook car windows. As they hurried toward the house, fat raindrops began falling. They barely made it inside before the storm hit. Rain hammered windows, wind howled around the old house's corners. Lights flickered once, twice, died completely. "Generator?" Annette asked hopefully. "Probably hasn't run in years." Owen pulled out his phone's flashlight. "Candles in the kitchen. And there's wine in the study that might help us wait this out." The kitchen yielded several pillar candles and a corkscrew. Soon they were in the study, candlelight dancing across walls and wine glasses catching golden reflections. Rain continued pounding windows, but inside felt cozy, intimate, separate from the world. "To successful permit hearings," Owen said, raising his glass. "To family secrets that turn out redemptive instead of damning," Annette countered. They drank, and the wine was excellent, rich and complex, probably worth more than Annette made in a month. But it was Owen's company that made her feel lightheaded, the way he looked at her in candlelight like she was something precious he was afraid to break. "Can I ask something?" Owen said after they'd sat in comfortable silence. "Sure. Why this work? Why spend your life uncovering painful histories?" Annette considered, swirling wine in her glass. "Because someone has to. Because the stories of enslaved people, their resistance and resilience and humanity, those stories matter. They deserve telling. But it's more than academic interest." Annette nodded slowly. "My great-great-grandmother was enslaved in South Carolina. Growing up, all we had were fragments, a first name, stories passed down through generations but without details. I became a historian because I wanted to find her full story." "Did you?" "Eventually. Took years, but I found her in plantation records, census documents, freedom papers from after the war." Annette's voice softened. "Her name was Sarah. She was a seamstress, had 5 children, and according to family stories, walked 200 miles to find her eldest son after emancipation." Owen went very still. "Sarah was the name of the cook in Thomas's journal." Annette's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. "What?" "The house cook who asked about her son being sold. Her name was Sarah." They stared at each other across candlelit space, and Annette felt something shift in her chest, recognition so profound it stole her breath. "Sarah Baptiste," she whispered. "Her married name was Baptiste." "Jesus." Owen set down his glass. "Your ancestor lived here. Worked in this house, knew my ancestor. They knew each other." Annette's voice was barely audible. "All this time, all these years of research, and I end up in the exact place where Sarah lived. That's not coincidence." "No." Annette looked around the study with new eyes. "She was here. Walked these halls, cooked in that kitchen, maybe even used the tunnel to help others escape." Thunder crashed overhead, lights flickered back on momentarily before dying again. In the brief illumination, Owen saw tears on Annette's cheeks. "Hey." He moved from his chair to the couch where she sat, close enough to touch but not quite touching. "You okay?" "I don't know." Annette wiped her eyes. "It's overwhelming. Finding this connection, being here where she lived. And you. Me. This thing between us. Your ancestor and mine, they knew each other, maybe trusted each other. And now we're here, descendants of master and slave, and I'm. You're what?" Annette looked at him through tears and candlelight. "I'm falling in love with you, and I don't know how to reconcile that with everything else." Owen's breath caught. "Annette. I know it's complicated. I know all the reasons it's impossible. But when you look at me like that, when you kiss me like you did last night, I forget everything else. Owen reached for her hands, lacing their fingers together. What if it doesn't have to be complicated? What if we're exactly where we're supposed to be? How can you say that? Your family owned mine. That's not something we just ignore. I'm not asking you to ignore it. Owen's voice was gentle but firm. I'm asking you to consider that maybe we're here to heal something broken for generations. Maybe Thomas and Sarah started something we're meant to finish. Lightning illuminated the room again, and Annette saw truth she'd been fighting in Owen's eyes. He loved her too. Despite history, despite complications, despite every rational reason why it couldn't work. Owen, she whispered. Tell me what you're thinking. I'm thinking I've never been more terrified. And I've never wanted anything more than I want this, want you. Owen's thumb traced across her knuckles. Then maybe we stop fighting it. What does that mean? It means maybe we trust that some things are bigger than fear. Bigger than history. Bigger than all the reasons we tell ourselves why we can't have what we want. Annette studied his face in candlelight, sincerity in his eyes, slight tremor in his hands that told her he was as scared as she was. If we do this, she said. If we try to make this work, it can't be secret. I won't be your hidden affair, or your walk on the wild side. I wouldn't ask you to be. And it can't compromise the historical work. Whatever happens between us, the estate's preservation comes first. Agreed. And we take it slow. Really slow. Because I need to understand what this means, what we're building. Owen smiled, and Annette felt her heart skip. As slow as you need. Okay then. Annette took a shaky breath. Okay. Owen leaned closer, and when he kissed her this time, it was soft, tentative, full of promise rather than desperation. When they broke apart, both were smiling. Outside, the storm raged. But inside the candlelit study, with rain drumming against windows and history settling around them like a blessing, Annette felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. For the estate, for stories that would finally be told, and for impossible love blooming between them like flowers in previously barren ground. So what happens now? She asked, curled against Owen's side on the couch. Now we figure it out together, Owen said, pressing a kiss to her head. All of it. The estate, the history, whatever this is between us. Together, Annette repeated, testing the word. Together, Owen confirmed. And as thunder rolled across the Georgia sky, Annette allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, some love stories were strong enough to heal even history's deepest wounds. Chapter 4. The morning after the storm brought the blazing sun and heat that made everything shimmer. Annette woke in the estate's guest room. Owen had insisted she stay rather than drive in the weather, feeling like her entire world had shifted overnight. Because it had. In 72 hours, she'd discovered her ancestors' connection to the estate, won a legal battle against development, and admitted she was falling in love with a man she'd barely met. 3 days. It seemed impossible that so much could change so quickly. Dr. Gerda Walker arrived at 9 with a team of graduate students and enough equipment to document every inch of the estate. She took one look at Annette and Owen coordinating research logistics in the kitchen, sharing coffee and moving together with ease, and pulled Annette aside. Something you want to tell me? Gerda's voice carried 20 years of friendship. It's complicated, Annette said, her standard response to questions about Owen. Complicated how? He's rich, white, and owns a plantation. You're a respected historian who's built her career on objectivity about exactly these historical complexities. That's not complicated, that's impossible. Annette felt heat rise in her cheeks. Gerda. Honey, I've watched you turn down perfectly nice professors, museum directors, and fellow historians because you were too focused on work. Now you're glowing like a woman in love after spending one night with a man whose family owned your ancestors. His ancestor helped enslaved people escape. He's donating the property for historical preservation. He's not what? Not privileged? Not carrying centuries of inherited wealth built on slave labor? Not the kind of man who could destroy your reputation if this goes wrong? The words hit hard because Annette had been thinking the same things. So what are you saying? That I should ignore my feelings because of history? I'm saying be careful. Gerda's expression softened. You're brilliant, and you're passionate about this work. Don't let attraction cloud your judgment about what's at stake. Before Annette could respond, Owen appeared in the doorway. Dr. Walker? The team's ready to start documenting the tunnel system. Gerda nodded, but her warning look lingered on Annette as they made their way to the cellar. The next few hours passed in intense documentation. Gerda's team photographed everything, measured tunnel dimensions, catalogued underground railroad artifacts, began establishing definitive historical significance. But tensions were building in ways that had nothing to do with historical research. At noon, a black sedan pulled up the circular drive. Owen watched from the window, his expression darkening as a woman emerged, tall, blonde, wearing clothes that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Marcia, he said quietly. Ex-fiancé? Annette asked, though she already knew from Owen's body language. Ex-fiancé. And probably not here to congratulate me on choosing preservation over profit. Marcia Strickland looked exactly like what she was, old Southern money wrapped in designer clothes and entitlement. She surveyed the estate with dismissive assessment that suggested she'd already calculated its sale value and found it wanting. Owen, darling. Her voice carried honeyed drawl of someone who'd grown up expecting the world to accommodate her wishes. You look rustic. Marcia. I wasn't expecting you. Obviously. Marcia's gaze shifted to Annette, something cold flickering in blue eyes. And you must be the historian who's convinced Owen to throw away $12 million. Dr. Annette Winter, Annette said evenly, offering her hand. Marcia's handshake was brief and calculating. Marcia Strickland. Owen and I were engaged until recently. Until you decided my bank account mattered more than I did, Owen corrected. Until you decided to have a midlife crisis about family history that's been dead for over a century. Marcia's smile was sharp. Really, Owen, this preservation project is very noble. But surely you see it's not practical. Practical, Owen repeated. Like our engagement was practical? Our engagement made sense. Families that understand each other, shared values, compatible backgrounds. Marcia's gaze flicked to Annette again. Some relationships are built to last, others are temporary fascinations. Annette felt heat rise in her chest, but before she could respond, Owen stepped closer to her side. Marcia, I think you should leave. Should I? Because from what I hear, your little historical project has upset important people. Judge William is concerned about your judgment. James Hartwell is exploring legal options. And your business partners in New York are questioning whether you're still capable of rational decision-making. Let them question. And Dr. Winter? Marcia's voice carried poison wrapped in silk. Has she mentioned that sleeping with property owners is considered an ethics violation in academic circles? Or that her career could be destroyed if this relationship becomes public? Annette's stomach dropped. Marcia was right, academic ethics guidelines were clear about conflicts of interest, and romantic relationships with property owners could compromise professional standing. That's enough, Owen said, voice dangerous. Is it? Because I've researched Dr. Winter. Brilliant woman, impressive career, absolutely devoted to historical objectivity. The kind of woman who would never compromise principles for a man. Marcia smiled. Unless, of course, the attraction was strong enough to make her forget everything she believes about maintaining professional boundaries. The implications hung in air like a threat. Annette felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with growing feelings for Owen and everything to do with hard-won reputation being weaponized against her. "You need to leave. Now." Owen's voice was flat, final. "I'll leave. But Owen? When this all falls apart, and it will, don't expect me to be waiting." Marcia climbed into her sedan and drove away, leaving behind silence that felt like shattered glass. "Annette," Owen started. "She's right." Annette's voice was barely above whisper. "About ethics violations, about the risk to my career. I've been so caught up in whatever this is that I haven't been thinking clearly." "So what are you saying? Maybe we need to step back. Keep things professional until the assessment is complete." Owen's jaw tightened. Because of what Marcia said? Because of what other people might think? Because she's right. My career, my reputation. Everything I've worked for could be destroyed if people think I'm compromising objectivity for personal reasons. And are you? Compromising your objectivity? Annette looked at him, really looked. At the man who'd chosen preservation over profit, who'd supported her research without question, who'd made her feel things she'd never expected. "I don't know," she admitted. "That's what scares me." Before Owen could respond, Dr. Walker appeared in the doorway. "Annette? We've found something else. Something big." They followed Gerda to the estate's library, where two graduate students were carefully removing books from built-in shelves. Behind the books, they discovered another hidden compartment. "More journals," Gerda explained, handing Annette a leather-bound volume. "But these are different. Later dates, different handwriting." Annette opened the journal carefully. The first entry was dated 1862, written in a woman's hand. "Thomas has been arrested," she read aloud. "Federal marshals came this morning, acting on information about Underground Railroad activity. He says nothing about the tunnel, about the families we've helped, but I fear they suspect. I must continue the work alone." "Margaret Ellsworth," Owen said, reading over Annette's shoulder. "Thomas's wife. I thought she didn't know about Underground Railroad activities. Apparently she knew everything." Annette continued reading. "Samuel and his family reached Cincinnati safely, praise God. But danger increases daily. If discovered, consequences will be severe not just for us, but for those we've helped." The journal revealed a story even more complex than Thomas's. After his arrest, Margaret had continued operating the Underground Railroad station for 2 more years, helping dozens reach freedom. She'd been smarter than her husband, more strategic and willing to work with the local black community. "Look at this entry," Gerda said, pointing to a passage dated September 1863. "Sarah has proven invaluable in organizing routes north. Her knowledge of the local community and connections with other enslaved families have made our work more effective. I regret that it took Thomas's arrest for me to understand how much we needed her perspective from the beginning." Annette's breath caught. "Sarah. My Sarah. Your ancestor wasn't just helped by Underground Railroad," Owen said quietly. "She was helping to run it." They spent the afternoon reading through Margaret's journals, uncovering partnership between white and black women hidden for over a century. Sarah Baptiste hadn't been just a cook, she'd been key organizer, coordinator, strategist in the Underground Railroad network. "This changes everything," Gerda said as they photographed final entries. "This level of collaboration, evidence of black leadership in Underground Railroad activities, it's historically invaluable." But as evening approached and the research team prepared to return to town, Annette found herself alone with Owen in the library where so many secrets had been revealed. "Your ancestor was extraordinary," Owen said, gently closing Margaret's journal. "She was." Annette traced the leather binding. "All these years of research, and I never imagined she was this central to resistance activities. She and Margaret both. They were revolutionaries." They were. Annette looked around the library, at shelves that had hidden secrets, at windows that had watched history unfold, at the man whose presence made her question everything she thought she knew about herself. Owen, about what Marcia said. Forget Marcia. I can't. Because she's right about ethics issues and risks. If we continue, whatever this is. I need to be transparent with the Historical Society, with colleagues. Owen studied her face. And if being transparent means losing credibility? Losing your career? Then I'll have to decide what matters more. What does matter more? Annette met his eyes, seeing the same question she'd been wrestling with since their first kiss. What mattered more, the career she'd built, reputation she'd earned, safe boundaries she'd maintained? Or the connection she felt with Owen, the sense they were part of something larger, the possibility of love that could heal generational wounds? I don't know yet, she said honestly. But I'm going to find out. Owen stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, see gold flecks in his blue eyes, feel warmth radiating from his body. Annette, he said softly. Yes? Whatever you decide, whatever you need, I'll respect it. But I need you to know something. What? I'm in love with you. Not with the idea of you, not with what you represent or what you can help me accomplish. With you. Your intelligence, passion, courage, the way you look at history like it's alive. I love you, and that's not changing regardless of what we decide about the rest. Annette's heart stopped, then began beating double time. Owen. You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. But looking into his eyes, seeing vulnerability and certainty there, Annette realized she did need to say something. Because despite complications, despite risks, despite every rational reason to protect herself, she knew what her heart had been telling her since the moment they'd met. I love you too, she whispered. Owen's face transformed, hope blooming across his features like sunrise. But, Annette continued, love isn't always enough. Sometimes it's the most dangerous thing of all. Why? Because it makes us believe impossible things are possible. Makes us take risks we shouldn't take. Makes us forget that some barriers exist for good reasons. Owen reached for her hands, lacing their fingers together. And sometimes it gives us courage to tear down barriers that should never have existed in the first place. They stood surrounded by ghosts of the past, Thomas and Margaret, Sarah and dozens who'd found freedom through their courage. And Annette felt history pressing around them, complexity of love that transcended racial and class boundaries, the impossibility of simple answers to complicated questions. So what do we do? She asked. We take it one day at a time. We're honest with each other and everyone else about what's happening. And we trust that Sarah and Thomas, Margaret and all the others, they'd want us to choose love over fear. Annette looked around the library one more time, seeing it with new eyes. Not just a room where secrets had been hidden, but a place where courage had been born, where impossible love had found a way to flourish despite every obstacle. One day at a time, she agreed. And when Owen kissed her this time, surrounded by evidence of their ancestors' courage, Annette felt something shift inside her chest. Not absence of fear, the fear was still there, real and rational and right. But something stronger than fear. Faith. In love, in truth, in the possibility that some stories were meant to heal rather than harm. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new complications, new reasons to question whether love was enough to bridge gaps history had created. But tonight, in a library full of secrets finally revealed, it felt like enough. It felt like everything. Share in the comments below, have you ever discovered something about your family's past that completely changed how you saw yourself? Chapter 5. 3 weeks into the historical assessment, the walls closed in. It started with Annette's phone ringing at dawn. Dr. Walker's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. They're challenging everything, Gerda said without preamble. Hartwell hired their own historical consultant. They're claiming our research is biased due to your personal relationship with the property owner. Annette sat up in bed, instantly awake. She was in Owen's guest room. They'd been taking things slow, but she'd been staying at the estate most nights to oversee the documentation work. What kind of challenge? They're questioning the authenticity of the journals, the significance of the Underground Railroad evidence, everything. And they're specifically citing your romantic involvement with Owen as grounds for academic misconduct. Annette's stomach dropped. This was exactly what she'd feared. How did they find out? Does it matter? Someone saw you together, or talked, or put pieces together. The point is, they're using it to undermine the entire assessment. Owen appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand, his expression shifting from domestic contentment to sharp concern as he read her face. "What's wrong?" he mouthed. Annette held up a finger. "I'll call my own experts," Gerda continued. "Independent historians who can verify our findings. But Annette, you need to distance yourself from this project. Immediately." "I can't do that." "You have to. Your career is on the line, and so is the preservation. If they can prove academic bias, they can throw out our entire case." The call ended, leaving Annette staring at her phone while the smell of bacon drifted from the kitchen. Owen sat on the bed's edge. "Tell me," he said simply. Annette explained everything, watching Owen's expression grow darker with each detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "They're using our relationship against the preservation effort," he said finally. "Yes. Then we end it." Annette's heart stopped. "What?" "Publicly. We announce that we've ended our relationship, that any romantic involvement was a temporary lapse in judgment, and that all future interactions will be strictly professional." "Owen, no." "Yes." His voice was firm, though she could see pain in his eyes. "The estate preservation matters more than our feelings. Sarah's story, Margaret's story, all the people who found freedom here, their legacy is more important than what we want." Annette felt tears prick her eyes. "You do that? Walk away from this, from us? To protect what we've discovered? To make sure this history gets preserved?" "Yes." It was exactly the right answer and exactly the wrong one. Owen was willing to sacrifice their relationship for the greater good, which proved everything she'd fallen in love with about him. But it also meant losing him just when she'd found courage to love him. "There has to be another way," she said. "Is there? You tell me, Annette. You're the expert on historical ethics. How do we save the preservation effort without compromising your integrity?" Before she could answer, Owen's phone rang. Judge Williams' name appeared on the screen. "Uncle," Owen answered, putting the call on speaker. "Owen, we need to talk. Privately. I'm with Dr. Winter. Whatever you have to say. This is family business. Come to my office. Alone. And Owen? Bring your grandfather's letter." The line went dead. "I don't like this," Annette said. "Neither do I. But maybe he has information that could help." An hour later, Owen sat across from his uncle in the judge's private chambers, Harold's letter spread on the mahogany desk between them. "You're destroying everything our family built," Judge Williams said without preamble. "I'm preserving the only part of our family legacy worth saving. By throwing away millions for misguided guilt about slavery? Owen, that was over a century and a half ago. It has nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with us." Owen's voice stayed steady. "We're still benefiting from wealth built on slave labor. We're still carrying responsibility for that history." Judge William leaned back. "And what about your responsibility to family? To living members of your bloodline who have built their lives around Ellsworth wealth and influence? What are you talking about?" "The development deal, Owen. It's not just about one property. Hartwell and Associates is part of a larger investment group that includes several family trusts, including mine. If the Ellsworth Manor sale falls through, it affects everyone. Owen felt something cold settle in his stomach. How much? Enough that your decision to play historical preservationist could bankrupt several family members who invested based on your grandfather's promises. What promises? Judge William pulled out a folder. Harold told us the sale was guaranteed. We invested accordingly. If you destroy the development deal, you destroy us. Owen studied the financial documents, seeing the scope of investment for the first time. His uncle was right, the financial impact would be devastating for several extended family members. So this is extortion, Owen said quietly. This is family responsibility. Something you seem to have forgotten in your infatuation with that historian. Leave Annette out of this. Can't do that, nephew. She's the one who convinced you to throw away rational thinking for romantic sentiment. Judge William's smile was cold. Speaking of which, I assume you know about the ethics investigation? Owen's jaw tightened. What ethics investigation? The one the university is conducting into Dr. Winter's conduct. Seems there are questions about whether her romantic involvement with you has compromised her historical assessment. You arranged that. I made some calls. Academic integrity is important, don't you think? Owen felt rage building, but kept his voice level. What do you want? Simple. Sell the property to Hartwell. Dar. Winter completes her historical documentation and files a report acknowledging the Underground Railroad connection without claiming it's significant enough to prevent development. Everyone wins. Except the history that gets bulldozed. History is just stories, Owen. The present matters more than the past. Owen stood, gathering Harold's letter. You're wrong, Uncle. History isn't just stories, it's truth. And some truths are worth protecting regardless of cost. Even if the cost is that woman's career. Because I promise you, if you continue this preservation nonsense, I'll make sure Dr. Winter never works in academia again. Owen's control snapped. Stay away from her. Then give me what I want. Owen left his uncle's office feeling trapped from all sides. Family pressure, financial implications, threats to Annette's career, every path seemed to lead to someone getting hurt. He drove back to the estate, his mind racing through possibilities, each worse than the last. But as he pulled up the circular drive, he saw something that made his heart stop. Miss Dot sat on the front porch in her old rocking chair, a suitcase beside her feet. At 93, she rarely left her small house near town, and she'd never come to the main house uninvited. Miss Dot? Owen hurried up the porch steps. What are you doing here? Waiting for you, child. We need to talk before it's too late. Annette appeared in the doorway, expression concerned. She's been here for an hour, insisting she had to speak with you personally. Owen helped Miss Dot inside to the study, where she accepted sweet tea with shaking hands. Despite her age, her dark eyes were sharp and alert. You're in trouble, she said without preamble. Yes, ma'am. We are. They're trying to take this place, tear down everything Thomas and Margaret and Sarah built. Owen and Annette exchanged glances. Miss Dot, how do you know about Sarah? Child, you think I don't know my own great-great-grandmother's story? Miss Dot's laugh was like dry leaves rustling. Sarah Baptiste was my blood. And she didn't risk her life helping folks find freedom just so her descendants could watch rich white men destroy her legacy. Annette sank into a chair. Sarah was your ancestor too? Course she was. That woman had more courage in her little finger than most people have in their whole bodies. She and Miss Margaret, they ran that Underground Railroad like a military operation. Saved near about 200 souls before the war ended. 200? Owen's voice was hoarse. The journals only mention The journals only mention the ones they wrote down. You think they kept detailed records of illegal activity? Miss Dot shook her head. Child, there's things about this place's history that never got written down. Things that got passed down through families like mine, generation to generation. She reached into her suitcase and pulled out a bundle wrapped in faded cloth. Been saving these for the right time. Reckon that time is now. Inside the cloth were more documents, letters, map fragments, and a photograph so old it was barely visible. But Annette recognized the faces, a white woman and a black woman standing together beside what looked like the estate's summer kitchen. Margaret and Sarah, she breathed. Taken in 1865, right after the war ended. They stayed friends, you know. Even after emancipation, even after Sarah could have gone anywhere, done anything. She chose to stay here, help other freed people establish themselves. Miss Margaret helped her buy land, start a school. Owen studied the photograph, seeing the bond between the two women that transcended racial boundaries of their time. They found a way to make it work. They did more than make it work, child. They changed everything around here. The school Sarah founded? It taught freed slaves to read and write for 50 years. The land Miss Margaret helped folks buy. Some of their descendants still live on it today. Miss Dot looked between Owen and Annette, her gaze knowing. Y'all think you're the first white man and black woman to find love on this property? You think history ain't got room for complicated things like that? Miss Dot, Annette started, but the old woman held up a hand. Hush, child. I got eyes. I got sense. And I got something else. She pulled out a final document from her bundle. This here's Sarah's will, dated 1889. She left something to the Ellsworth family. Something that's been waiting over a century for the right Ellsworth to claim it. Owen read the document, his expression growing more amazed with each line. She left the family a trust. Money she'd saved, invested, grown over the years. It's substantial. How substantial? Annette asked. Enough to buy out every family member who invested in the development deal. Enough to establish the historical center we talked about. Enough to make this place everything it should have been all along. Miss Dot smiled. Sarah was smart with money. She knew someday there'd be an Ellsworth who wanted to do right by this place. She made sure that Ellsworth would have the resources to do it. But why didn't she leave it to her own family? Annette asked. Because she knew her family would be fine. We're survivors, child. Always have been. But she also knew that healing only happens when folks work together. White and black, past and present. She left that money to create partnership, not charity. Owen stood, pacing to the window that looked out over grounds where so much history had unfolded. This changes everything. It gives us options, Annette agreed. But it doesn't solve the ethics investigation, the challenges to our research. Actually, Miss Dot said, reaching into her suitcase one more time, it might solve more than you think. She pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. These here are Sarah's own records of the Underground Railroad activities. Names, dates, routes, everything. She kept detailed accounts, just never shared them with the white folks because she couldn't trust them not to get other people killed. Annette opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were dozens of pages in Sarah's handwriting, documentation that would establish beyond any doubt the historical significance of the estate. This is... Annette's voice failed her. This is proof that can't be challenged, Owen finished. Independent verification of everything we found. And there's one more thing, Miss Dot said. These records? They show Sarah Baptiste as the lead organizer of Underground Railroad activities in this whole region. Not assistant, not helper. Leader. The implications were staggering. Sarah hadn't just been involved in Underground Railroad activities, she'd been running them. The estate hadn't just been a stop, it had been headquarters. Miss. Owen said quietly, "Why are you sharing this now? Why not years ago?" "Because it wasn't time. Because the right Ellsworth and the right Baptiste descendant hadn't found each other yet." She looked meaningfully between Owen and Annette. "Some things got to wait for the right moment, the right people." "You knew," Annette realized. "You knew who I was when I arrived." "Child, you got Sarah's eyes, Sarah's way of tilting your head when you're thinking hard." "Course I knew. Been waiting for you to show up here for years." That evening, after Miss. Had returned to town with promises to testify at any hearing necessary, Owen and Annette sat in the study surrounded by documents that would change everything. "We can do it," Owen said. "Save the estate, establish the historical center, pay off family obligations, and create something that honors both our ancestors." "And us?" Annette asked quietly. "What about the ethics investigation? The consequences?" Owen was quiet for a long moment. "What if we don't have to choose between integrity and happiness? What if there's a third option?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we get married?" Annette's breath caught. "Owen. I'm serious. If we're married, if our relationship is legitimate and permanent rather than an affair that compromises your objectivity, it changes everything. It becomes partnership, not conflict of interest." "You're asking me to marry you to solve our problems?" "No." Owen moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "I'm asking you to marry you because I love you. Because I want to spend my life with you. Because what we've found together is worth fighting for. Any other benefits would just be convenient." Annette looked into his eyes, seeing love and certainty and something deeper, recognition of the path their ancestors had started, the healing they could continue. "This is crazy," she whispered. "Maybe. Or maybe it's exactly what's supposed to happen. We've known each other less than a month. Sarah and Margaret knew each other less than a week before they trusted each other with their lives. Sometimes love moves fast when it's right." Annette thought about everything that had brought them to this moment, the inheritance Owen hadn't wanted, the research assignment that had become so much more, the discoveries that had revealed their family's intertwined histories. "If I say yes," she said, "it's because." "Because?" "Because I love you too. Because what we've found here, the history, the truth, the possibility of healing, I want to protect it. I want to build on it. I want to spend my life telling these stories with you." Owen's smile was like sunrise. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes to everything. To marriage, to the historical center, to building something beautiful on ground that used to hold so much pain." Owen kissed her then, and this time there was no desperation, no fear of complications. Just joy and certainty and the sense that they were exactly where they belonged. Outside, dusk was falling over the estate grounds. Soon, those grounds would be transformed, not into a shopping mall or development project, but into a place where people could learn about courage, resistance, and love that transcended boundaries. The Ellsworth Winter Historical Center would tell stories that had been hidden too long, stories of enslaved people who fought for freedom, of white allies who risked everything to help them, of partnerships that created change despite impossible odds. And at the center of it all would be Sarah and Margaret's legacy, the understanding that healing happens when people choose love over fear, truth over comfort, courage over safety. 6 months later, Owen and Annette stood in the estate's restored garden, surrounded by friends and family who had come to witness their wedding. Miss. Sat in the front row, tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched Sarah's great-great-granddaughter marry Thomas's great-great-grandson on ground where their ancestors had worked together to change history. Dr. Walker served as maid of honor, having become one of the strongest supporters of the marriage once she understood its historical significance. Even Judge William attended, grudgingly admitting that Sarah's trust had solved financial problems he couldn't have imagined. Reverend Joshua Smitty, the community leader who had tested both Owen and Annette's commitment to justice, performed the ceremony. His words about love transcending historical wounds, about partnerships that honored the past while building the future, brought tears to many eyes. But it was the final moment everyone would remember. When Owen and Annette lit a unity candle using flames from two separate candles, one representing the Ellsworth family and one representing the Baptiste family, and then placed it on a memorial stone engraved with names of everyone who had found freedom through the Underground Railroad station. As the single flame flickered in evening air, casting warm light over the gathered community, Annette felt the presence of ancestors who had made this moment possible. Sarah and Margaret, Thomas and countless unnamed people who had chosen courage over comfort, love over fear. Ready for the next chapter? Owen whispered as they walked hand in hand toward the reception. Ready for all of it, Annette replied, looking back at the estate that had become not just their home but their life's work. Behind them, the historical center was already taking shape. Construction had begun on visitor facilities, exhibit spaces, and educational programs that would bring thousands each year to learn about Underground Railroad history. But more than that, the center would be a place where difficult conversations could happen, where history's complexities could be explored honestly, where people of all backgrounds could find inspiration in stories of those who had fought for justice. What family legacy would you want to transform? Share your thoughts below. 1 year after the wedding, Annette stood in the estate's main house, now the Ellsworth Winter Historical Center, watching a group of middle school students examine artifacts from the Underground Railroad exhibit. Their questions were thoughtful, their engagement genuine, and their excitement about history was exactly what she and Owen had hoped to inspire. Dr. Winter? One young girl raised her hand. How did Sarah and Margaret stay friends when everyone else thought they shouldn't be? Annette smiled, remembering asking herself the same question. They chose to see each other as human beings first. They decided that doing the right thing mattered more than what other people thought. And they understood that some friendships are strong enough to change the world. Like you and Mr. Owen? Yes, Annette said, catching sight of her husband through the window as he led a tour group through the reconstructed slave quarters. Like me and Mr. Owen. Later that evening, after the last visitor had left and the center was quiet, Owen found Annette in the library where they'd first discovered Margaret's journals. Good day? He asked, settling beside her on the couch where they'd shared their first real conversation about love and history. The best. 80 visitors, 4 school groups, and 3 researchers who want to use our archives for dissertations. Sarah would be proud. They all would be. Annette curled against Owen's side, looking around the room that held so many memories. Sometimes I can't believe this is our life. Sometimes I can't believe we almost let fear stop us from having it. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to sounds of the old house settling around them. Through the windows, they could see lights in small houses built for visiting researchers and program participants, a community growing around the stories they were committed to preserving. Owen? I'm pregnant. Owen went very still, then turned to look at her with wonder and joy spreading across his face. Really? Really? Due in the spring. A baby. Owen's voice was soft with amazement. Our baby. Sarah and Thomas's descendant. Margaret and Baptiste's descendant, Annette corrected, smiling through happy tears. All of them. All the love and courage and hope they carried, passed down to someone new. Owen kissed her then, gentle and reverent, and Annette felt the presence of generations of ancestors blessing this moment, this love, this future they were building together. Outside, spring rain began falling on the memorial garden where flowers bloomed over ground that had once held so much pain. But inside the house that love had transformed, all was warmth and light and possibility. The past had been honored. The truth had been told. And love, complicated, courageous, transformative love, had found a way to heal even history's deepest wounds. Some stories, Annette thought as she fell asleep in her husband's arms, were worth waiting over a century to unfold. And some love was strong enough to change not just the present, but the future itself. Tomorrow would bring new visitors to the historical center, new stories to preserve, new opportunities to build bridges between past and present. But tonight, in a house full of ghosts who had finally found peace, all was exactly as it should be. Love had conquered history. Truth had conquered silence. And hope had conquered fear. The Ellsworth Winter legacy would continue, carrying forward the best of what came before while building something entirely new, a future where love transcended boundaries, where truth mattered more than comfort, and where courage created change that lasted for generations. In the end, that was the most powerful love story of all. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe for more passionate tales of love conquering history. Tomorrow brings another unforgettable journey of hearts finding their way to each other.